Hey guys, how's it going? It's Danconia. Welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2020 Team of Week 28. So Week 28 has seen some teams really stand out in the Overwatch League, with some teams going completely unbeaten through the week, not dropping a map, when they've had quite substantial match schedules. We've also seen the big clash between the Philadelphia Fusion and the San Francisco Shock, and there's some really good showings from the Philadelphia Fusion lads over there. So we've got a lot to look into. Some teams really haven't made the cut, some teams have not been, some people have not been good enough, and some people have really stood out this week. So with Team of the Week, as ever, we start off with the support, so we're going to start off in that main support role. And for this one, I'm actually going to give it to Big Goose of the Los Angeles Gladiators. Now, this may seem a little bit of a wayward pick for some people, and I can kind of understand that. The Gladiators have gone 6-0 this week, getting a 3-0 victory over the Dallas Fuel and a 3-0 victory over the Boston Uprising. And, well, they've looked pretty good doing it. Their team synergy has been getting better. We have been seeing more and more from their supports and from their tank line, and not just the DPS. We know how good Birdring is. So I think the Gladiators are steadily improving, and we're finally starting to see the iterations of the Gladiators that we expected at the start of the season with the caliber of players they've got. Big Goose and Shaz have both looked off sort of colour in the past month or so, but this was Big Goose back to form on the Lucio, looking as good as ever. Setting up with OGE for that big 4K boop on icon roll, massive thing, and that's not just what gets him into this. His beats have been good, his speed and amps have been good, and he's been able to get in the fight and set the team up for success. It's been really good, a really good showing from Big Goose this week, and I think he really deserves a spot here. Obviously, you know, you have people like Funny Astro who have had a good week for the Philadelphia Fusion, but I really wanted to give it to Big Goose here, and I think he deserves it. So it is going to Big Goose, but my flex support will be from the Philadelphia Fusion. It is a player that tends to feature in this Team of the Week, you know, in periodic increments. It's Alarm. Alarm, dude, he's such a good support. He is one of the front runners for the MVP, and you can see why. He was really hyped up coming into the league. He was like this massive support that we thought was going to be a massive difference to the Philadelphia Fusion, and he certainly has been that. They can rely on Alarm to be the stable backline for that Fusion squad, no more than what we saw from Alarm this week. He was getting more value than Violet or Twilight was from the San Francisco Shock. And to be honest, when we look at Alarm versus Violet, we're looking at two of the best supports in the league right now going up against each other, especially in that flex support role. And Alarm looked better. And this is the first time that we can distinctively say Alarm looked like the best support in the league. And he did. Now, obviously that's a caveat to saying, well, what happens when he goes up against Luffy of the Shanghai Dragons? But I actually think the support line of the Philadelphia Fusion is probably the best in the league when it's being run as Alarm and Funny Astro. I think that is a god tier support line right now. And even going up against the likes of Lee Jae-gon and Luffy in the APAC region for Shanghai, when you look at Violet and Twilight or Violet and Moth, I don't think they can compete with Alarm and Funny Astro. But Alarm especially, he is the... this Philadelphia Fusion squad would be nowhere near where it is without Alarm. He is ridiculously good, and he has such a wide hero pool as well. He's great on the Ana, he's got great sleeps, great nanos, healing output is, you know, through the roof, but you expect that with Ana. But his positioning's great as well. He very rarely gets caught out. And then when he needs to flex onto the Moira and stuff like that, he's also fantastic on that. But he's also got the Brig in his back pocket as well. So yeah, he's been fantastic this week, and they would certainly have not been able to sweep the Fusion without Alarm. You know, Alarm is fantastic, and he was there. Actually, he was there. Remember the first point take on King's Row for the Philadelphia Fusion? When they were basically in overtime, we thought that they were going to get full held. Well, Sado dies with Primal Rage, and the two people left on the point are Hisu and Alarm. Alarm on Yana, obviously. And Alarm manages to keep Hisu alive, so Hisu can stay alive. Hisu dies, but that obviously then comes back on Alarm, who dies as well. But they've stalled for long enough for Shadow to come back with that Primal Rage and take that point. Crucial moment in the match, because it could have been 1-1, and instead it was 2-0 in the end, and Philadelphia were on a roll. And the momentum could have shifted massively. So Alarm is a massive player for the Philadelphia Fusion, and he really deserves this spot in my opinion. Moving on to the off-tank role, and first of all, I want to shout out Giguri, because we've seen Giguri play a whole match for the first time in a very, very, very long time for the Shanghai Dragons against the London Spitfire. She looked really good. She looks like she's been improving in her time on the bench. She was on the Diva a lot. She got some really good bombs actually set up alongside Lip's EMPs. And Giguri looks like she deserves to be a main tank, off tank in the league. Obviously, she is going to struggle to start ahead of Void, so maybe a move in the off-season may be in store for Giguri so she can get some more playtime at another team. It would be nice to see more of Giguri in a starting lineup some way or another, but it's not going to go to Giguri, that's for sure. Another shout-out is Fury of the Philadelphia Fusion. I mean, a lot of Philadelphia Fusion players are going to get a shout-out in this one because, well, they just played so darn well. Fury, he was great on the Sigma and the Diva, which is what we saw on the most against the San Francisco Shock. He looked like a lot of the time he was getting more value than Choi Hyobin. Choi Hyobin being last year's MVP candidate and an MVP candidate for this entire season, when Fury isn't. So, yeah, kind of showed up Choi Hyobin a little bit there. But I still think Fury had a massive weekend, but I don't think he had as massive as a weekend as the person I've picked. We're going back to the purple side of LA. We're going back to the Gladiators and Space. Because Space, he is, in my opinion, I mean, everyone will look at Birdring and say he is fantastic for the Gladiators. In my opinion, the best player on the Gladiators team is Space. He is a fantastic off-tank. A really, really, really good off-tank. And he wouldn't look out of place in a team like Philadelphia Fusion, in my opinion, especially with the players that the Philadelphia Fusion have. Obviously, they're quite stacked with their off-tank roster, so they don't need to be changing anything. But I think Space is one of the best off-tanks in this league. And he demonstrated that this weekend, especially when on the Sigma, he looked so good. He was getting so much value out of his gravitic fluxes. So much value. And then just being the aggressor, which is really, really good. He was really aggressive on that Sigma. He was getting crazy value out of everything he did. His rocks were brilliant. And I really think he's a shining light for the Los Angeles Gladiators, especially this weekend. And I don't think they would be where they are without him. So I think he deserves a spot in the off-tank role for this week, getting crazy value across both matches against the Boston Uprising and Dallas Fuel. And it was quite clear that he was better than what he was going up against. He was quite clear that he was better than Punk. He was better than Note. And he just ran riot in both of those games. So I think Space really deserves this spot this week. He's a fantastic player and future's looking bright for old Space. But moving over to our main tank role, and this is where we move over to APAC actually. I want to give an honourable mention to Sado. I think Sado's had a great week, and since, we've been moving more back to Winston, for the time being at least, I think he's looked really, really good. Really, really good on the Winston. But I am going to give it to a fellow Winston player who currently resides in APAC and in Korea. It is Gesture. And we haven't heard much from Gesture recently, have we? He's kind of been plodding along in that main tank role. He was known back in the day as one of the best Winstons around. And he's kind of rekindled that spirit in recent weeks with Winston coming back into the meta. We've always known that Gesture's Reinhardt's a little bit lacking, although it's got better. And his Orisa is not as good as his Winston. But to be honest, this week he's looked like he's been unlocked from shackles that have held him down this season. He's been able to go with that Winston, and with a great off-tank partner in 2U now. Remember, he used to be alongside Fury at the London Spitfire, so he used to have a really great off-tank partner. Alongside a great off-tank partner in 2U, who has demonstrated his definite skill on the Diva this week as well. Gesture has been able to just be that main tank he always used to be. Be the guy setting up plays, getting great value from Primal Rages, getting great bubbles, going in and getting out at exactly the perfect time, not feeding, but also not being too passive. And we see it all the time from Winston players. They either feed or they're too passive and not getting the value they should be. And Gesture gets this balance perfect. Time after time. And it is a massive contribution to the Seoul Dynasty looking much more powerful than we have seen before. And it'll be interesting to see if Gesture can continue this. I've heard he's got a nasty Roadhog. So, yeah, I wonder about those playoffs. We'll see what the meta is when that comes around. But sticking with Seoul Dynasty, because we're going to our DPS and we're going to Profit. Profit is Profit. And we had a lot of questions at the start of the season saying, well, Profit, is he what he was? Is he now washed up? Is that it? Is that it for Profit? Is this the end of the run for the player that was once called the best in the world? The GOAT, if you want to call it that way. And in recent weeks, he said, nah, I am far from done. And this week especially, I've been extremely impressed with his ability to just play whatever the team needs him to play. You want me on Echo? I'll play Echo. You want me on Mei? I'll play Mei. You want me on Widowmaker? I'll play Widowmaker. You want me on Ashe? Oh, I'll play Ashe. You want me on Tracer? I'll play Tracer. You want me on Sombra? I'll play Sombra. He can play anything. It's bloody crazy. And we knew this from his London Spitfire days, but he has been so good this week for the Seoul Dynasty. He run ragged against the London Spitfire. And then when they came up against a tougher opponent in the New York Excelsior, he continued on his great form. And he is now making a massive difference to this Seoul Dynasty side, alongside Fitz and Gesture and Badosin. Those players with a lot of experience coming for that London Spitfire roster are now starting to it's starting to pull together, and I think the meta is also favourable to the Dynasty as well. So I think Profit has really benefited from that, but the amount of heroes he played this week was crazy, but also to the standard he played them at. We know how crazy Profit is, and he made a massive difference to the Dynasty and how they got their 3-0 wins this weekend, including that dominant display over one of the best teams in Asia, New York. So I think Profit really deserves this spot. But there are a ton of other DPS players we could mention here. Doha of the Dallas Fuel had a really good week, despite the Dallas Fuel's mixed results. Shockwave, definitely the best looking player on the Vancouver Titans right now, and carried them to fight wins at times, so he deserves a mention. But we're going to move over to our more hit scanny role, but it's kind of, DPS at the moment is very up in the air because, you know, players like Profit, we're seeing playing both projectile and hit scan, so it's not really divided up into those two specific categories now. But for the second role, I want to give Birdring a mention, because Birdring again has been stellar for the Gladiators this weekend. He has been popping off left, right and centre. It's great to see Birdring back to the form he showed in the inaugural season, and I am sure that everyone wants it to continue. XE had a decent week for the Paris Eternal despite their struggles, you could say, against the Atlanta Reign, but he certainly looked like he was keeping up with the Atlanta Reign DPS, if not outdoing them, but he was sort of the Paris Eternal. They didn't have the greatest of weeks. Carpe of the Philadelphia Fusion, like, you know, what do we say about Carpe? He's Carpe, he pops off, that's what he does, and he always does it. It's pretty crazy. It's pretty crazy. He's definitely one of the best DPS players, especially hitscan in the league, and well, not many people can argue with Carpe, but it's not going to Carpe. Also, I want to mention KSP of the Los Angeles Valiant. He was phenomenal against the Florida Mayhem, which got them the reverse sweep. KSP, he was actually really popping off at times, carrying fights for that Valiant side. And we've known that the Valiant DPS can carry at certain times, and this was one of those weeks where KSP was just red hot. Absolutely red hot. But I am going to give it to Hisu of the Philadelphia Fusion. Now, there's some people may say give it to Carpe, but I think Hisu had a bigger impact than Carpe, and I think Hisu set up Carpe very, very well in terms of being a partner DPS. Hisu, we saw a lot of him on different roles, including the Junkrat, including the Sombra, and we saw sometimes double hit scan and stuff like that. So Hisu is incredibly flexible. His Junkrat was brilliant. On I think the first 2 maps of that match against the Philadelphia Fusion at times, against the San Francisco Shock at times, especially on the first map, because we see Junkrat on control generally, but then we saw a little bit on the second map as well, and he looked really, really darn good. Then he moves over to the Sombra, and he's getting so much more value than the enemy Sombra, so much more value. And if it's not Hisu in the kill feed, it's Carpe. And Hisu, I think, did a really great job, especially on that Sombra, of setting up his team for dives, setting up his team to have that win condition. I've hacked this person, let's kill them. Very often you can see Hisu setting up Carpe for stuff as well. I think Hisu, he was great last week against in the Countdown Cup. He was great in the Countdown Cup, but Hisu's really stepping up now. And I thought Hisu at the start of the season would be a challenger to Carpe. I thought, well, this Philadelphia Fusion side is not going to rely on Carpe anymore. And that is true. They don't rely on Carpe anymore. But Hisu can play alongside Carpe. He's not a replacement for Carpe. They also have Ivy. They also have EQO. The DPS of the Philadelphia Fusion is stacked. Hisu is very, 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 very good. And I think he can start for any team in the league right now. So Hisu's going to get it. I think his impact for the Philadelphia Fusion over the San Francisco Shock was massive. Absolutely massive. And it may sometimes kind of fall by the wayside when you see Carpe popping off and stuff like that. But Hisu was fantastic this weekend, and that's why I'm giving him that spot. But that's going to round it out for this team of the week. It's Big Goose, Alarm, Space, Gesture, Prophet, and Hisu. The last regular season team of the week will be next week for week 29, and that is where it ends. For the regular season, that's where it ends. That's the final regular season team of the week, and then we go from there into the playoffs, and it gets mighty, mighty interesting when it gets to the playoffs and then after that, especially in terms of videos. But for now, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you'd like to give a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.